Hi, welcome to our webinar on monitoring and evaluation. I think we should start now. We are 17 participants by now. Wonderful. I am Jan-Peter Glock. Next to me is sitting Loredana, right? We welcome you to this webinar on monitoring and evaluation, which we hold as part of the Civitas Metamorphosis project. We're both working in that project. We're sitting here right now at the TU Dresden in Dresden. We are one of the members of the project. It's a European project, a Civitas project funded by the European Union. And yeah, I'll shortly introduce the project on the next slide. For now, let me just say that this monitoring and evaluation webinar is kind of an introduction, and it aims to take away your fear of monitoring and evaluation. Some people of you might think of a very complicated, very difficult process when talking about monitoring and evaluation, which it isn't. And that is what we want to show you today. So we will make you acquainted with monitoring and evaluation as it is taught in the textbooks, and then we will also give you first-hand experience that we made in the Metamorphosis project, such as what do you need to do, what barriers could you face, and how could you overcome them. As I said, this is more like an introduction to monitoring and evaluation. If you're really interested in all the bits and pieces, there are many more monitoring and evaluation webinars also from Civitas, and one I highly recommend, which is from Tom Rye from the Edinburgh Napier University, and he's talking about all the bits and pieces, the differences between different outcomes, outputs, targets, indicators, how they relate to each other, etc. And we added a link to his YouTube video at the end of this presentation. All right, so before we start, one more thing. I hope you can all hear me good, and you can see me, and you can see also the presentation that we're going to hold. And if you have any questions, just write them in the chat. There should be a chat button somewhere where you can just ask us any questions, and if they are urgent, we will address them right away. And if they are not that urgent, we will wait until the end of the presentation, and we should have ample time for discussion afterwards. All right, so let's start with a short introduction to the project, Metamorphosis. Metamorphosis started in 2017, and it runs out next year in May. And it is a EU project, as I said, and we have 7 cities and 12 partners. The five partners that are not cities are basically scientific partners, consulting the cities, helping them to implement their measures, helping them with capacity building, dissemination of information, etc., etc. And what is all this about? It's about children-friendly neighborhood transformation. So these 7 cities are trying to transform their neighborhoods into children-friendly neighborhoods through implementing different sustainable mobility measures. And so far, 60 different measures have been implemented, a total of roughly 600 times. So in average, every measure has been implemented 10 times, which is great, I think. Okay, so far the project. The outline for our next hour or so will be an overview or introduction, if you will. What is monitoring and evaluation? What is the structure of monitoring and evaluation? In short, abbreviation M&E. And why would you want to engage in monitoring and evaluation? And then Loredana will take you on a journey basically through our Metamorphosis monitoring and evaluation process, walk you through it step by step, and give you a lot of examples and lessons learned. And yeah. All right, so Let's begin to get to know each other with a very short, very easy 2 questions. Question 1 is, do you know what monitoring and evaluation is? And there should be well, the second question you can already see, should be a question popping up on your screens where you can answer, yes, I do know, I know to some extent, I'm not sure about it, and no, I don't know monitoring and evaluation. Oh, you're already answering the second question as well, as I can see. And that's great, just go on. And most of you already know monitoring and evaluation. We'll wait a bit more. All right, so 15 people have already answered, 16 now, and most of you do know, roughly 70% of you do know what monitoring evaluation is. Some know it to some extent, some are not sure, which is maybe the same as to some extent. Yeah, so if you all know what monitoring and evaluation is, I wonder why you're here. For those of you who are not sure yet, I brought a definition from the Cambridge Dictionary that I want to show you. And that is, monitoring is to watch and check a situation carefully for a period of time in order to discover something about it. And evaluation is the process of judging something's quality, importance, or value. And you see, as the name already suggests, monitoring and evaluation, it's 2 things, but they come hand in hand. And what connects them is kind of the magic word information, or data, if you like. Collecting information when it comes to monitoring and comparing that kind of information that you just collected when it comes to evaluation. And now let's suggest your answers to the second question. When do you monitor and evaluate? Interesting. Most of you use it every now and then. Some of you use it quite often. One uses it every day, and I'm really curious about what he or she might have thought when answering these questions, because actually this is the answer I was hoping for every day. Yeah, brilliant. So I think we all do it every day. Every day you're monitoring and evaluating measures to reach targets. And since only one person said every day, you might not believe me in when I say that we do it every day. So let me give you an example of how we do it every day. So you see coffee mug here, or cup rather, and you can also make it a tea mug if you like, if you're from Britain, right? So most of us will have an aim during the day, which is to have a good coffee or to have a good tea. And the question is, how do we get there? By, this is pretty subjective, but by adding no sugar maybe, or by adding just a sip of milk. And now the question would be, how do we get there? We know by now, but to get there, we need to keep track of sugar and milk and the amounts we put into the coffee. So we keep track of the amount of sugar, maybe in teaspoons, and the amount of milk, maybe in sips. And that is already monitoring and evaluation. You monitor these indicators, sugar in teaspoons, milk in sips, and then you compare them. You compare the results against your liking. And if your liking is you have no sugar, then one teaspoon of sugar would already be too much. So you see, monitoring and evaluation is what you do every day, but you do it unconsciously because it is so easy. And I think the concept doesn't get much more complicated when it comes to urban planning. So we have an urban planning example here. This time the aim is more sustainable transportation, pretty general. How do we get there? By maybe reducing the number of cars by up to 50%, or by allocating 3 cargo bikes in the neighborhood. These are just examples. So again, what do we keep track of to know whether we reach our aims? Well, the number of cars parked or driving, and obviously the number of cargo bikes. Pretty straightforward. And then monitoring and evaluation is, again, to measure these indicators and compare them to the set target. Did we already allocate 3 bikes, or haven't we reached our target yet? So it's very easy. Now I wonder, why are people throwing up their hands in horror when they hear monitoring and evaluation, even though they do it every day and they do it unconsciously because it's so easy. And I think it might be because monitoring and evaluation sounds very complicated when it gets explained by professionals. So it's good that you have 2 semi-professionals here, right, explaining it to you in an easy way. Let's take the professional definition now and walk through it and kind of, let's say, take out the magic, make it clear. So I brought another definition from Günemann, which is from the Civitas Challenge project. And this time it's not just monitoring and evaluation, but it's monitoring and evaluation in terms of innovative urban mobility planning measures, SUMPs. So monitoring is the systematic collection of data on specified indicators to provide authorities and stakeholders with an indication, and so on and so on. Evaluation is the systematic and objective assessment of an ongoing or completed plan, policy, measure, preparation, implementation, and results. And the difference to our previous definition is just, in my opinion, the systematic, which are highlighted here for you, right? So you always do collect data every day and you always assess it, but you don't do it systematically. So going back to our example, our urban planning example from before, let's just use this example to understand the basic terms and the systematic of M&E. So firstly, I highlighted for you this first part with objective and target. Before that was aim and how, right? So the proper terms would be objective, you have an objective, and then you set targets that you want to reach. And I highlighted that in red and named it part of the project, because this is actually not even genuinely M&E. This is part of the project. You have to do it anyway. Whenever you want to reach a project, or whenever you want to implement a project, you have to define what you want to do beforehand. So if you're afraid of that part, then that's not a problem of monitoring and evaluation, basically, right? Right, but notice the 2 words outcome and output that I also put in bold. And there's a slight difference between those 2 words and their regards to the targets or the objective. And that is something that Tom Rye talks about in his webinar. So if you're really interested in those differences, then I highly recommend his webinar. I won't go into that discussion now. All right, and then I highlighted here in blue the part that is actually M&E, and that is the indicators that you define. So you already have your targets that address your objective. Now you have to find some indicators that you need to measure and then assess the targets and whether you reach them. So this is actually genuinely M&E, this unconscious part. However, when it comes to professionalizing M&E, what is important is that you become aware of it, right? And that you become aware of it before you start acting, before you start allocating your cargo bikes, right? Loredana will tell you later why it is so important to become aware of your monitoring and evaluation before you actually start implementing your project. In the meantime, we return to this professional definition and walk through the structure of monitoring and evaluation using the definition. So imagine you have an urban planning project. It should be on the left side of your screen, if I'm not mistaken. You have an urban planning project. You want to maybe decrease the share of cars, increase the green spaces, and get rid of all those ugly parking lots. So surely your project will be structured like this. You have a planning phase, you have on the bottom right an implementation phase, and you have some kind of transitioning to the next project maybe, right? Now the question is, how does monitoring and evaluation come in here? Because surely you want to know right, what you do and what you've done and what you've reached. And monitoring and evaluation comes in like this. Planning, you do when you also plan your project. That's very easy. They relate these phases. And monitoring you do while you do the implementation in the project. And notice that the monitoring starts a bit before the implementation. And that again is what Loredana is going to talk about later. This awareness, right? Be aware of what you do and start doing it before you implement your measures. Yes, I already highlighted in the definition to the right side, I highlighted in the colors of the different monitoring and evaluation phases those words that kind of give meaning to the phases. So planning is all about making your monitoring and evaluation systematic, finding specific indicators, preparing an objective assessment, while monitoring is the collection of data and the evaluation is the assessment of data. Now, if that wouldn't be enough, there is one more differentiation, and that is due to two aims of monitoring and evaluation. So on the one hand, and what we've been talking about the last 20 minutes or so, is impact evaluation. So you monitor and evaluate the achievement of objectives, as you can see in the definition, the completed plan, policy, or measure, and the results. And this is called impact evaluation, or I like to call it monitoring evaluation for impact, because it's not just the evaluation, it's also the monitoring as well. So what is an impact in our example would be, for example, the removal of cars, right? And then on the other hand, you have process evaluation. And here you monitor the progress in an ongoing plan. And in regards to evaluation, you evaluate an ongoing plan, obviously, policy or measure, its preparation and implementation, not its results though. And notice the phases have changed. Monitoring now starts way earlier in the planning phase already, because I mean you're trying to monitor and evaluate an ongoing plan. So planning is the planning phase is part of that ongoing plan. And notice also that evaluation already starts parallel to monitoring, which is because there is a feedback cycle, let's say. The information that you get from the monitoring during the implementation of the project, you want to evaluate and then feed back into the implementation process. And that could mean, for example, in our coffee or tea case in the beginning, that we look at the progress and we encounter, or we ask the question, do we encounter barriers to adding sugar or milk? And then we monitor and we see, yes, the milk is not even opened yet. So pouring makes no sense. And then the feedback will be, always open the bottle before you pour in the milk. And that way you make sure that your implementation will be a success, right? So I guess you get what or why you want process evaluation. And if not, I have reasons for why you would want it, for why you should care about monitoring and evaluation in general, and in this case, process evaluation. First reason is to be sure the project is going into the right direction. You only know when you keep track of it. And then to adjust processes or measures before they fail. And that's what I just talked about, these feedback cycles. And then thirdly, to make reporting to funders or investors possible. Because they also want to know what's going on. And in regards to impact, this third point is valid as well, right? To make reporting possible, because in our case, the EU wants to know whether we've reached the goals that they expect us to reach. And then the fourth point is to learn whether a measure is or was successful, which is related to the third one, obviously. And then the last point is to pick out the successful measures for repetition, upscaling, and transfer, which is probably one of the most important aims of all these projects. So the short answer to why should I care about monitoring and evaluation is basically money, the investor, success, and the change you want, right? So we did monitoring and evaluation, and we're still doing it, both impact and process monitoring and evaluation in Metamorphosis, to assure the project success, to assure its ability to bring about change, to transform neighborhoods into children-friendly neighborhoods, and of course to satisfy the EU accountants. So I hope you're eager to hear more from Loredana about how we did it, what we experienced so far, and what we learned.
Thank you very much, Pete. Thank you for your introduction and the microphone. So I hope you can hear me. Okay. Well, so now we can go on. We can go really into the project and see what the Metamorphosis cities are actually doing in these years, the 3 years. Well, first of all, very important, Pete already mentioned that, but I want to highlight that children are the main target group in the project. They are actively involved in all the phases of the project, and they contribute collecting data during the implementation, planning the implementations as well. And they evaluate data with us and also disseminate results. So yeah, we have many different measures in the 70 cities, and we can group them in 5 main activity fields. First of all, we have temporary street closures, particularly around schools, but we also have organized bigger events. For example, let's ride Southampton, where many streets in the city are closed during one day. Measure can be permanent or temporary. And yeah, we also have interventions in public spaces, including use of on-street leisure elements, or for example, as you can see in the picture on the top, transformation of parking spots. There, for example, we are in Zurich, where children are, this way they can be empowered to take ownership of the public space in the surroundings of the school, and they can also decide what to do, what to build, how to reuse the space of the parking spot, and they play there after that. There are also other measures, for example, where children are actively involved. For example, the painting tunnel, where children try to increase the perception of safety of a tunnel, and they painted this, and they really enjoy the activities. We have hybrid zones, where private and public meet each other on the road. Private activities, for example, they can offer their services on the street, and we have very good examples in Alba Iulia in Romania, for example, like the public breakfast or the urban library. Well, crystallization points are implemented in some of our cities. They are urban gardenings, as you can see on these pictures in Meran. But we also have mobility share points, rental systems of e-bikes, cargo bikes, where people can try sustainable mobility modes, alternative to cars. And most of the measures are they have the goal to empower active mobility, so they are mainly carried out at schools. They are workshops or trainings. As you can see on the picture, we have the experience in Tilburg, where children they judge what's good, which are the qualities or the weakness of the surrounding of the school. They go around and show also drivers when they have a bad behavior, or also prove with this red cards with thumbs that they like green in the neighborhood. And they also collect idea on how to improve the problems in the surrounding of the schools. We also have, for example, the interactive walking game in München, but you can find more information of all these measures on our website. Other workshops or trainings are implemented in München, for example, to learn how to repair a bike, or sometimes they're just cycling competencies, and a very big success is having the walking bus, where small groups of elementary students are picked up at some stops, and they can walk to school together. And once they arrive there, they can pin stickers of different colors depending on the mode of transport they use to get to school. They pin these stickers on a poster, a rabbit poster, and that's very important for us to collect data on model split. And the last activity fields are the educational innovation tools, which are provides material provided to the schools for children of different ages, and they are very helpful to encourage behavioral change and involve children in a playful way, and help teachers above all to do it, to include it in the curriculum at school. So we can go on focusing on the monitoring and evaluation approach we are applying in the project. So we are at the moment in the last part of the project. You can see the gray last months are still upcoming, and at the beginning of the project we started we delivered a general evaluation plan, including all the guidelines for the cities to prepare their evaluation plans for the measures they wanted to implement. And on the base of these evaluation plans, measures were implemented. They started to collect data, and during the whole time we tried to monitoring the impacts, and carry out a preliminary evaluation, which are still continuing. And in the end, actually from this next month, we are focusing on a final evaluation of the impacts, trying to compare all the results at project levels. And whereas during the period of the project, we sent regularly a questionnaire, a process evaluation questionnaire, which is very important for us to get information on the progress of the implementations, and also understand if cities have problems, and eventually solve these arising problems. Well, Pete already mentioned about the mixed evaluation approach we are using. So we have an impact and a process evaluation, which are different, but we should consider them as one. And we have to say that impact has its focus on the practical effects of the measures, whereas process evaluations focus more on steps. What is important in the process evaluation is to understand why a measure succeeded or failed, and we need to investigate drivers, barriers, or any single factor influencing the results of these implementations. That's why we send this questionnaire regularly, every 6 months, and we try to support the cities. What's important to say is that we need to integrate progress with impact evaluation, because on one side, impact is more quantitative, but we also need a qualitative approach through the questionnaire and also our contacts with the cities. We had the opportunity to know about also perceptions of the people which are closer to the implementations, and who really knows what's happening, why things worked or not. And lessons learned are in the end the most important thing, together with the results, with the outcomes. But we need them to avoid similar problems in the future, and repeat what worked good. Now we can focus a little bit more on impact evaluation, and I would like to give you some recommendations, some information on the main steps to plan a good evaluation, to set the stage for a good impact evaluation. First of all, goals has to be defined, and after that, on the base of these goals, we have to set targets, which should be smart, specific, measurable, ambitious, realistic, and time-related. Now, then we need indicators. We need to select appropriate indicators, which means indicators well related to the targets. So they have to be measurable, good to communicate, especially in our case, we have to work with children, so we need easy indicators which can be easily measured. And what we learned from our experience is that it's very important to reflect on the cause-effect relations from the very beginning of the project, from the planning phase, and also it try to identify risks and barriers. After you plan the measures, you will collect data, which is the big challenge, I think. At least in our project, cities are, of course, facing difficulties. So we would like to give our recommendations. It's important to collect primary and secondary data. So primary are data that you directly collect through different methods. You can use surveys, interviews, observations, or countings. And secondary data are already available probably in your city, so they can describe the current situation. They are very important for a comparison between the situation before and after the implementation. So what we highly recommend is to, if you don't have this secondary data already available, you need to collect data before you implement the measure, and then after try to guarantee the same conditions. So for example, yeah, same weather, same time during the day, and yeah, be sure that external factors are not influencing the results of your measurement. And samples should be representative, and we also recommend to use a control group, so to understand what happened, a group where the measure is implemented, where a change is text is tried, and at the same time see what happened to a control group, so another group where the measure is not actually implemented, to check the differences and if external factors are also involved. Well, so yeah, next slide. After the data are collected, you need to analyze them, and yeah, okay. You need to, you have to also to consider that you have to be prepared to collect data. You should start to implement, measure, collect data when you're sure that budget, staff, and knowledge are enough in your city, that you are you don't have a lack of staff, that you have a good internal organization and good resources in terms of time and money as well. And yeah, measurement should be done before and after the implementation, as I said before. And yeah, after that, you will analyze data, and it requires a lot of time, of course, knowledge. That's why it's often possible that transfers of result delay. And for this reason, I strongly recommend to ask for support. For example, especially when a project partner like us is responsible for that. Sometimes cities have to do a first evaluation of the data because they collected them, so they know the way they collect the data, and they are the best people to start to evaluate the results. But of course, ask for support when you need it, and change the methods of the measurements in case you realized that that specific method is not successful, that should be have a change. And failures are also results, so that's a very important lessons learned. You shouldn't keep your achievements as a secret. Even if you had problems, difficulties, you should share as much as possible, so that other people, other projects can learn from your experience, which is valuable for sure. And yeah, to conclude, just few points. Main message: don't be afraid, and try to think about monitoring evaluation from the very beginning of your work, of your project, and try to modify monitoring and evaluation just your work to your budget, stuff, and knowledge, and try to focus on the implementations, on some of the implementations you plan, and collect data when you realize is the when you can get good results, and yeah, try to analyze risk, barriers, and lessons learned over time, and avoid similar problems in the futures. And as regard the impact evaluation, once you realize indicators are feasible, so they are appropriate to assess the effects of the measure, try to repeat that and transfer successful experiences you have in your cities for other projects or similar measures. Well, I think we are we're ready. We finished. We want to recommend once again the webinar of Tom Rye on monitoring evaluation. And if you have any question, you can write them in the chat box. I saw that Damian working on the project Sunrise is one of the sister projects in the Civitas network. He said that, oh, thank you very much. He's sharing with us the online course material on co-evaluation. Yeah, I think that could be really interesting for many of us. Okay. Otherwise, any other comment or questions? Pete, do you have comments? Okay. Okay. We can also contact us on our email address if you want to later. Yeah, Damian is writing another question. Yeah. May I please ask a question? Have you identified your measures through a co-creation process? Well, yeah. The cities, the partner cities had work. They organized some workshop before the beginning of the project. Also after, but the measures they decided to plan to implement, they are from co-creation and participatory processes that started to involve the population of the neighborhoods involved before the project, with the involvement of children as well. And another question. In Sunrise, we also do evaluation of co-creation action, not just measures. Do you do something similar? Yeah, I think was part of the question before. Yeah, exactly. As Karl-Heinz is writing, we had vision building work package. Yeah, where ideas and needs from the bottom, from the population were arised. Any other question? Well, I can see any other question. So thank you very much for joining the webinar, and please contact us in case of other comments or questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye.